Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live, coming today from hotel room in sunny Atlanta, where it's a little chilly, but sunny. We're happy for that. Today, I have a really special guest. We're all special, but I'm really excited to talk to Gaurav Dhillon, who is currently the chairman and CEO of SnapLogic. And I say currently because he was formerly one of the founders of Informatica, who some of you may have seen my interview with their current CEO recently. So anyway, lots of success stories in his background, and I'm really excited to get into conversation today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So maybe we could just start. You could, for those who aren't very familiar, tell us a little bit about SnapLogic.
Yeah. Well, SnapLogic is connective tissue for the modern enterprise. We help typically large companies connect their applications, data, APIs, and now the AI. And so we are sort of that connective tissue for the postmodern enterprise, especially with AI.
Right. Could you give an example or two of sort of how that works? Yeah.
Adobe, one of our very early customers from 10 years ago, we recently put out a press release, one of those, Toyota 10-year consumer reports type of thing. And it's very satisfying, Karen, to see these concepts that we had that drove the foundation of the company to come true and work and scale over time. So Adobe standardized on SnapLogic, replacing their legacy integration products about a decade ago. And our dream was to apply a combination of modern web thought, some of the lessons from the iPhone, into the dull world of integration and help people have self-service and scale and security. And we're very satisfied. And it's been a huge testament to the hard work the folks at Adobe have done, that over the past 10 years, we've connected the enterprise, grown with them from where they were to where they are today. Other customers include people like Spotify in the finance department, using self-service and security to manage all the currency fluctuations that they found in the time of COVID. And most recently, Boehringer Ingelheim, a $20 billion pharmaceutical company, has started to standardize on us and apply us into the hard work of integrating their sophisticated business, manufacturing, and other things.
Great. So what prompted you to launch SnapLogic?
I laugh because I get asked this question. Look, the philosophical aspect is I love building companies, building teams, building products. The more pragmatic, and the more pragmatic thing is it was a combination of the cloud, and then a couple of years later, the iPhone started to come along. Now, what that means, though, for us is cloud means you can connect anywhere, no matter where you are. Browser in a hotel room. Here I am at my home in the peninsula, in the Bay Area. The iPhone let anybody do it. Mom can use the iPhone to use FaceTime, talk to grandchild.
Yes.
And now with the advances in technology, I felt we could connect anything, anyone, anywhere, anything. And that's not something we could do in the mid-90s. I mean, that was sort of a relatively Paleolithic age.
I was going to say, that was really early to think about cloud, right?
Yeah. Well, this has been 10 plus years now, so it wasn't an overnight success. It almost never is in the enterprise. But what was very clear to me, and again, perhaps we were a bit early, but it was very clear to me that these advances would apply to the business of connecting the enterprise as much as they would to streaming video, to using apps and on your smartphone and so on and so forth. So we took that approach of how do we make something very smart, sophisticated, scalable, and self-service, simple at the same time. Simple is hard. That's my favorite Steve Jobs quote. Complex is easy, simple is hard. And so that's the thing that has driven us over the years, that power of and, to make it sophisticated and simple. And then you get a benefit from it as a user of the technology, as a customer, in a way that you simply don't get from very hard to use products that may be very sophisticated, very secure, but very, very hard to use.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find most interesting about when you had the vision, when you founded the company and cloud, is that, it's still difficult sometimes for cloud companies to wean the enterprise off of their legacy systems, their on-prem systems, And I can imagine that when you founded SnapLogic, you were like having to pry them away. How did you manage to make that transition with legacy on-prem systems in your big enterprise clients?
It wasn't easy at first, Karen,
Mhm.
because as you can imagine, this is mission critical. People don't want to make a change. It's not as simple as moving a consumer thing from one to the other. But what was happening is, out of necessity, companies like Adobe and then someone like a Spotify and COVID has the
Mhm.
currencies are fluctuating, they're leaving money on the table and subscriptions and so on. So what happens is when somebody needs to innovate, they're willing to take the risk. And then
Mhm.
you get, that sort of flywheel, enterprise flywheel working for you. And then it becomes more and more commonplace, and people feel secure that someone like them in a company like theirs has used it. But to net it out, the pioneers who used it, and now everybody's seeing the benefit of it, were seeing as much as a 10x improvement in what they could do. I'll give you an example. An architect of our most recent victory in Germany, this multi tens of billion dollar pharmaceutical company, came over at our sales kickoff. It happened last week. I'm still excited about it.
I bet
And
you
we had him
are.
on stage, and the question is, why SnapLogic, right? And he said,
Mhm.
look, ultimately it comes down to what you can accomplish, how much you can do with how little effort. And there were a number of incumbents, some of the legacy players, some of the new players, and everybody did their little dog and pony. And he was given 10 minutes to show what SnapLogic could do. He did it in 5 minutes. That was kind of instrumental to make them a customer. We had to get over this is too good to be true a little bit. And
Of
then,
course.
of course, right? Of course. And then 6 weeks later, he's still being asked in the hallways if that he did that live or was that a recording.
Wow.
So yes, we make or lose money, but being right and pulling off some real technological innovations is very
Mhm.
deeply satisfying you know so that is how people are moving, because they see the value. Wouldn't you like to be 10x better? And maybe there's a reason not to do it, but then something comes along, like the cloud, like the data, AI, all these kind of things start to come along, and cumulatively it becomes, A, you're not the first one to do it, and B, there's much
Mhm.
more pull, even if there's no push to do it. And I spent my adult life in the enterprise. I get the concerns. We're sympathetic. We have a deep empathy for enterprise concerns. So we work with them to say, okay, well, let's start small. Maybe we can grow from there. Let's take the cloud projects or the AI projects or some of the new SaaS apps that you have, and then grow from there.
Yeah. So finding ways to reduce risk
Yeah.
while encouraging innovation. So you mentioned AI a couple times. We'll need to talk about that. So let's just do that early. How do you see AI and automation sort of reshaping, for lack of a better word, the way that companies approach data integration? And what role or how does SnapLogic play in that transformation?
Yeah, yeah. So look, having done this now for decades, shall we say, the exact number is classified, I've come to a point of view, which is when somebody in a business somewhere wants to
Mhm.
create a data integration or an app integration, or needs to connect various business systems together, they have an intention. And that intention needs to be carried out through all the software layers that make it possible. Okay. Now,
Mhm.
the less friction there is between that intention, and then the actual accomplishment of that connection, the better off the customer is. So,
Mm.
what's been driving us in AI is a realization that integration is a pattern business. you know Radiology is such a ripe field for AI because there's 168 whatever bones. I didn't study medicine, and they're men, women, tall, short, young, old, and all that. But it's a pattern business. You might see an image and say, is that benign or not of a particular scan? But there's a pattern business. Similarly, integration is a pattern business, and we felt that AI would revolutionize how you could connect the enterprise. So we shipped our first product 8 years ago, Iris AI. It was very basic. I like to say that was like my father's GPS, a black and white little arrow that said, turn now. But then by making that bet and then continuing to systematically invest in it through machine learning and then through generative AI, what we've seen is the majority of people using our product use the AI assistants to do it, even
Mm.
the experts, because it's easier for them to do. So we feel AI is ambidextrous. On the one hand, it lets you connect your enterprise much easier. Secondly, AI self needs data. it's dehydrated in the enterprise right now. So we can talk about that some more if time permits.
Well, let's pull on the integration thread a little bit. So AI-powered platforms with low-code or no-code solutions, we see a lot of those. How do you see the role of traditional IT teams changing and evolving in enterprise integration?
Look, first of all, I have a friend who says shadow IT is broken IT, right?
Mm.
So the good news is the CIO has a seat at the table. She's now sitting in the boardroom with the other executives. The bad news is all these other executives are saying, hey, I use Perplexity or I used OpenAI 3 or whatever. How come our stuff doesn't work like this, right?
Yeah.
So that combination of innovation and security, scalability, the enterprise concerns is where I think the modern IT is under a lot of pressure. We think actually that because of AI, there's sort of this AI 2K moment, like a year 2K moment for the modern enterprise, where there's going to be a very finite set of people who embrace it, do it successfully, and spurt ahead, and those who don't get the benefit of AI. Because look, the best way to keep the enterprise secure is to switch off the internet, don't allow any email, don't have any video conferences, put the bunkers up.
That would make a lot of CISOs happy for sure.
Yes, that would, but their salespeople might starve to death. So,
right. Yeah.
So in that same fashion, I think we are at this point where enterprise IT is under tremendous pressure. And if they approach it in a way that they're a true partner and have the shared objectives with, say, the sales executive, the finance executive, with the supply chain executive, then they can collaborate to use AI for good, to reimagine business processes, to think of data in new ways. And you can get a lot of benefit from that in the same way as you can in the consumer world,
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the IT leaders that I know and have worked with, and there's such a tension between needing to innovate and keeping things secure, right?
Yes,
because the risk is huge when they make
It
mistakes.
is a real risk, and it's not sort of a bad actor always. One of our competitors had the misfortune of having a salesperson upload their customer file to OpenAI's public space company. We informed them that they should take that down, and they did. But look, the way we look at it is, we know when you're connected to the internet, there's a chance that an email come across with a phishing attack, etc. But that doesn't mean you don't use the web, you don't use cloud computing, you use it in a secure manner. In the case of AI, we figured out how to do this in a way that lets people use our API management capability, which is also built into our platform, data integration, app integration, API management, to then have the same access controls that you might have in place so HR can see the payroll, other people can't see the payroll. That same access control model can be applied to ingress and egress out to AI LLM. So if you wrap them in an API management layer from us, you can more easily figure out who gets what and who uploads what and uses it. And this is sort of our enterprise pedigree, because this is what we think about in, yes, what does this problem mean for somebody with 100,000 employees? It's a very different set of concerns than somebody with 10, or a unicorn in Silicon Valley. They're laissez-faire about, let's innovate or die kind of thing. But there are 20, 30, $100 billion companies with 100,000 employees that have much to worry about. And at the same time, it's an opportunity.
I hear your enterprise empathy coming through there. I love that term, by the way.
Is my enterprise showing? Yes.
Your enterprise is showing, exactly. So I want to turn to leadership in a minute, but first, just to think about your vision for what's coming. So, and we've talked about what I think are some of the biggest trends, but maybe there are more shaping enterprise software and data integration over the next 5 years or so, and how specifically you're positioning SnapLogic to be able to lead in that future vision.
Yeah. So look, our strategy is simple and consistent. We ask ourselves about when we first started about 10 odd years ago, we asked ourselves, what would Apple do if they came into this business? Well, they would make something very scalable, very secure, and beautiful, easy to use at the same time. You could argue that the BlackBerry had all this security, but over time, Apple figured it out, right? So we went with that model, and we hand new employees the built the last book, because it's the power of and. And what we see as our success, our unique position in the marketplace is there's a bunch of products that have been there for a long time. We like to joke that that's like visiting Jurassic Park. There's a lot of dinosaur products. And then you have a bunch of new innovations. The problem with the Jurassic Park crowd is that they are very hard to use. They haven't kept up with all the advances in technology. The problem with the new crowd is they don't understand. They don't have an empathy for enterprise concerns. They don't deeply understand global concerns. How does German data stay in Germany? Those sort of things. And then all the levels of security and attack. So SnapLogic's unique value proposition is to combine power and ease of use in one platform that has multiple attributes. And is something that works with a number of innovations, no matter what they might be. One of our customers, Spirent, user of our agent creator platform, is using our products to build agents in the US and for the employees in China. And they simply switch out the Alibaba large language model for people in China because they don't have OpenAI access, and they use OpenAI in the US. So in that way, being a trusted platform for IT people to do a better job of serving their business counterparts is long-term strategy for us. I'm very focused on that. We're going to continue to make it more powerful. We're going to continue to make it simpler at the same time.
Yeah, and both simple and clear, which is, I think, what we need in a vision.
Because they know what they need to solve, right? So everything else gets in the way, and we forget that, And so that's very, very important, because if you're a business person, you know what you're trying to make something happen that day.
Well, thank you for that. Let's turn for a few minutes now and talk about leadership. So, as I mentioned at the offset, you've led successful companies before. I wonder about, in particular, leadership lessons, but lessons from your experience at Informatica and others, and now SnapLogic, that have shaped your approach to scaling a business in today's tech landscape.
Yeah. Boy, so many mistakes to share. So first of all, thank you. I feel I've been graced, in our mid-20s to take Informatica public as CEO, employee number one, 12 odd years was, I truly feel graced. That doesn't happen often, sometimes never, and people toil all those times. So I'd say probably if you break it down, I would bring it down to some elements of leadership lessons on the human capacity and some lessons on evolution of technology and timing. Those are probably the big aspects, I think, of leadership. So the first one is you've got to figure out how to keep the soul of a small company, even as you relentlessly scale to be a big company. And that is incredibly difficult because at the one hand, a small company is patriarchal. There is concern. It's a family feeling, and you pull for each other. It's our companies, our money, it's our customer, and everybody feels a sense of ownership and pride, a deep pride and a sense of wanting to do the right thing. As the company grows and grows, when you can't see the back of the room in all hands meetings, you have a lot of people who may not have that. And at the same time, some of the people that you had in the beginning may not be scaling. So this combination of the soul of a small company with the operational excellence, the customer intimacy of a larger company, I think is probably the most important leadership lesson to learn.
Yeah. And so how do you deal with that? Because I'm having flashbacks. I was an early employee at Compact Computer, like pre-revenue, and was there through, 17,000 employees and about $15 billion. And it was amazing.
It was. What a run.
And we became a big company, right?
You did. That's pretty OG. That's pretty OG stuff.
With all the big company stuff, right?
A lot of stories. Yeah. I had one of those compact handheld things too. And
great.
So look, the way you do that is you model the behavior. What we say doesn't matter. Enron proved that. What we do is everything. The posters in the hallway, everything that you might try and talk about, ultimately people are seeing what you do. How do you hire people? How do you promote people? How do you reluctantly, if you've hired well, if they have scaling issues or they're not able to grow with the company, how do you reluctantly part ways in a respectful manner with those that don't work out? Your actions and constantly are lessons and models for the rest of the team to follow. And you're never not a leader in a mid-sized large company or even a small company. You're always a leader. So I think that's the most important thing. People forget that. So we model that behavior in the decisions we make. We look to bring on awesome people. We look to make decisions bravely at times of market turmoil and change. And that behavior, I think, is what engenders long-term trust and long-term alignment with creating a great company. Look, stock options vest, bonuses get spent, but there's something inside that wants you to be part of greatness. That smile when you talked about the run at Compaq, my pride in, as I say, the two siblings, Informatica and SnapLogic, my pride in that is something that never goes away,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to model it.
Yeah. That's so well said. I think about that as sort of every action and inaction that you make has a consequence, right? Whether you're a leader or not, but it's like it's turbocharged when you're a leader.
Read on Glassdoor, the culture of a company is the worst behavior the CEO is willing to tolerate.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So what you didn't say is actually as important as what you did say. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, all right. So that's a culture piece. So scaling in sort of this tech landscape.
So look, time is the most important force in technology.
Mm-hmm.
I had the joy of listening to Ray Kurzweil speak the other day in Menlo Park. He was at Kepler's promoting his new book, Singularity's Nearer. He was interviewed by his daughter. It was fantastic, so interviewing him on stage. And he said something that struck me. He said, look, to be a successful inventor, you have to be a futurist. Because your invention has to work in the time that you launch it. And I was like, no Silicon Valley company has ever died for lack of vision. It generally dies from lack of execution, which generally translates into a timing mishap. So this is a leadership lesson of how do we look at multiple bets? How do we go from one product to multiple products? How do we look at, McKinsey has a decent model, first horizon, second horizon, third horizon. How do we, even when we have setbacks, like we're trying to get SnapLogic going, oh my gosh, not everybody's under the kind of innovation juice that a Spotify or Adobe is, and then AI comes along. How do I find and align everybody and say, yes, we have 1,000 snaps and we're going to need 1,100 snaps. How do we recalibrate things and invest in AI, which becomes potentially the big blockbuster drug, if you would, of the future? So that comes down to a judgment of market timing. Some of it is instinctive. Good judgment does come from bad experience, and some of it is just hiring smart people and listening to them. I think product market fit, Karen, is not delegatable. You can't do it.
Right.
You can't hire people to do that. The original team, the founding team, or the original management team has to figure out product market fit. However, I believe scaling is delegatable. And you can hire your tutors. I did. The first head of marketing in Informatica taught me marketing. The first head of sales taught me sales. I didn't know those things. I hired my tutors. So you can scale from people you bring in, but you can't do product market fit. And that's true of successive products as well. So you have to be obsessive about product market fit as a leader of the company. And you have to be very open to delegating to scale for global business, scalable business, India operations, Germany, getting going in Italy and Spain. I mean, you have to delegate that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. If I write another book, Gaurav, I will interview you again.
Boy, have I some stories for you.
I bet you do. So I have one last question for you, and that has to do with executive decision making. I'm really fascinated by sort of the ambiguity that comes with being a senior leader in an organization, particularly one where there's a lot of change. And I think by the time decisions rise typically to the level of the C-suite and certainly the CEO, they're like these 49-51 decisions, because if they were easy, they would have been made and would not need to rise to your level. So how do you deal with those decisions that just come with the territory of being a CEO?
Yeah. So look, I think the first of all is you have to free yourself from mistake making. You will make some bad decisions. It will happen. And I see too many first-time CEOs obsess about a decision, like, get on with it. Not making a decision is as much of a bad decision in a time of change. I mean, here's AI. Fifi Lee, the Stanford researcher who invented ImageNet, in The Economist, she called it the next Cambrian explosion. And I think it captures it really well.
Yeah.
So we can't be indecisive at Cambrian explosion moments in life. Now, we also can't let our customer file escape to the internet. So how do you balance that? So my tried and tested method on this is to sort of wait for that inaudible clicking sound between the data and my instinct. And when they line up, go. And you just wait for it. You debate it. You have another meeting. You look at other things. You call trusted advisors, board members, people you really like and trust in the industry. And there's so many smart people around. But at some point, you have that inaudible click about the data, and the instincts are what inform the context of that data. People talk about data-driven decisions. Absolutely right. For what should we sell in what country by what month, sort of the 3 dimensions of sales and those kind of things. Absolutely can be data driven, but at the very top, deciding which product line to launch, how much to put into it, what country to enter when, those sort of things have a combination of data and context. And
that data informed.
So never give up on your instincts. But as you grow, make sure that your data and the context around that is better and better all the time. I mean, that's our business, right? We serve that up for people to use. But there's always going to be a combination of context and instinct in the bigger decisions, in my opinion.
Yeah, terrific. Well, what a inspiring place to end our conversation. Thank you so much, Gaurav, for being with us today and sharing all of these wonderful insights that you've both learned over the years, but that you're obviously still curious and still learning here at SnapLogic. So thank you again.